Okay, so I've been saying for years that foldables are for early adopters only, and they don't make sense for regular people until the only difference between a foldable and a regular phone is the fact that one of them happens to fold in half, and there's no other compromises. So when this all got started 7 years ago with the Galaxy Fold 1, it was really exciting that it folded in half, but there were obviously a ton of compromises back then to make that happen for the first time. From the huge bezels on that cover screen, to the smaller subpar cameras and battery and other specs, the extremely compromised durability, and of course, the crease, the massive crease through the middle. So every year, foldables have gotten better and better and better and better from a bunch of different companies as they slowly tackled each one of those compromises. So foldables have gotten thinner, and they've gotten bigger batteries, and they've gotten better hinges and smaller creases. And that's all led to this, the Oppo Find N6. It does seem kind of random that this is now peak foldable, but I actually think by the end of this video, you'll agree with me. So the obvious problem number one with old foldables was that they suck to use one-handed. Since they're thicker, they have worse bezels, and just they're generally compromised versus a normal slab phone. But we've seen this string of thinner foldable phones, especially in the past few years, and now you look at the Oppo Find N6, from the front, you'd hardly know it's just a normal slab phone. Now you do have the telltale asymmetrical metal, so rounded corners on one side, square corners on the hinge side. That's how you'd be able to know. But other than that, it just looks like a normal 6.6-inch phone. Oppo's been absolutely cooking with the materials and the build, so when you pick it up and use it, it genuinely feels like a regular slab phone because it's the same size as one now. This phone is just under 9 millimeters thin and weighs around 230 grams. For context, the iPhone 17 Pro Max is also just under 9 millimeters thin and around 230 grams. So this is effectively a no compromises normal phone, at least dimensions wise, before you even open the thing. So many of the previous foldables, I remember using them, and there's like, you can use the outside screen, but you didn't really want to. You'd rather just open it up and get to the better screen, but this you could just use like normal. It's perfectly fine to take pictures with, to watch videos on, to text on, because the keyboard isn't too small. It's a normal aspect ratio. It's great. And it also has all the flagship specs, by the way. 3600 nits peak brightness, 1800 nits full screen, so it's very viewable everywhere, outdoors, super responsive, 1 to 120 hertz LTPO, high frequency PWM dimming, the whole thing. Now, folding in half also always has presented a bunch of challenges with just the physics of fitting stuff in a smaller, thinner form factor that has to split. So for years, these folding phones never really had flagship cameras because there wasn't enough room. And also the batteries would always be smaller because they had to split it in half around a hinge, which is tough because they're trying to power a bigger display. But it's 2026, so now, of course, the tech has evolved to the point where we have silicon carbon batteries. And this ultra-thin phone, split in half, still has a total of a 6,000 milliamp hour battery, which is more than a lot of slab phones already, plus 80-watt charging and 50-watt wireless charging. And then as far as cameras, so the physical sensor size can never quite be the same as a slab phone because, again, it's split in half, so there's just not as much room in the z-axis dimension. But there has been development of some big sensors with shallow z-axis thickness specifically to fit in thinner phones. So this phone has the same ISOCELL HP5 sensor that's in the S25 Edge. 200 megapixels, 1/1.56 inches, optically stabilized. So there is that, plus a 50 megapixel ultra wide and a 50 megapixel 3x telephoto. And then, I don't know if you remember, but folding phones used to have significantly lesser chips too, less room inside, less room for cooling. This phone has a Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 inside, but a binned version with one less core. So for all intents and purposes, I think we can say it's a flagship chip and maximizing what you can do in that thin of a space. Plus, there's a new dedicated S1 chip for better network performance. So now, despite being ultra thin and chopped in half, this thing has flagship displays, flagship chips, flagship specs, high-end cameras. It's also IP59 water and dust resistance rated, which used to be nuts for foldables, but now you can just spill water on this thing and it'll be fine. But the piece de resistance for this N6 is without question this center display. For years, for folding phones, we've gotten used to them, having an amazing folding screen, but also having a small crease in the middle. And the crease, it's just one of those things where on most phones, most of the time, it doesn't bother you. Trust me, as someone who's used these phones, I've said it before, it's like bezels. Most of the time, you're just looking at the content or reading or typing, so you're not really seeing it. But every once in a while, it catches the light the right way, or you run your finger over it, and it just hits, you're reminded of it, and so you can still notice it sometimes. But not with this phone. So the N6 has this new thing they developed called the no-feel crease. and I'd seen the marketing, I'd watched some videos about it, but they're mostly sponsored, so I was a bit skeptical. Okay, but I got it in my hands, and this thing is actually super impressive. You open it up, it's the classic big square, 8.1 inches corner to corner, same full screen brightness, same 1 to 120 hertz LTPO, same PWM dimming. But you might notice there's basically no perceptible crease here. I mean, there's a little bit of crease if you're really looking for it. But compared to other foldables we've seen and that I've used, this is basically no crease. And the extra bit of engineering that goes into solving this last problem is actually very intricate. And they're already doing a bunch of the stuff that everyone else has already thought of, like softening the crease radius by doing a teardrop shape when it's folded. But the main innovation here is with this hinge. They literally laser scan each individual titanium hinge to map the slightest variations across the surface, then 3D print a liquid polymer to fill in the exact micro gaps to perfectly smooth out the hinge, and then harden it with ultraviolet light. It is incredibly complicated, but the end result is they minimize the surface level variations across the hinge from 0.2 millimeters down to 0.05 millimeters, which is apparently less than half a human hair thickness. So that, combined with the slightly thicker layer of top glass that they're using, really makes a big visual difference and feel difference. A lot of these foldables also, they look great out the box, but the more you use it, as you know, the more you fold and unfold it, the deeper that crease becomes, the more you notice it. This process, they're saying, is good for 600,000 folds and still not showing any significant crease. Which, obviously, I've been folding and unfolding this a lot, but not that many times, so I'm just gonna have to take their word for it. But yeah, now that's the last few percent of quality of life when you're using a foldable, never really noticing or perceiving the crease at all. And the cherry on top is, unlike Samsung's Fold, it actually has pen support. So there's this little half case you can snap on the back of this phone that holds the pen near the coil, so it wireless charges from the phone's battery. And then, yeah, it works on both the front cover screen and the interior display with more than 4,000 levels of pressure sensitivity and minimal lag. So if you're the artist type or the handwritten note type, this display has a digitizer layer to keep that dream alive. And yes, it charges because it does have Bluetooth, so it can still be used as a remote camera shutter. So now in 2026, this Oppo Find N6 is complete as far as I'm concerned. We've gone through one by one each of the potential compromises of a folding phone and engineered them away. So aside from the price tag, of course, this is effectively a regular phone that just happens to fold in half. And so, yeah, peak foldable. We've arrived, I guess. Which, of course, got me thinking about the obvious elephant in the room. We are saying all of this before Apple jumps in the ring with what we expect to be a folding iPhone. The rumors are saying it's probably going to be this year, end of this year. And actually that makes perfect sense because that's what Apple does with emerging technologies. That's kind of their thing. They'll sit on the sidelines for the first few cycles while the most aggressive, daring companies innovate and work out all the bugs and the kinks and the compromises. And then once that technology is mature enough, that's when they jump in with all the learnings from everyone else and an Appleified version of it. So that's Vision Pro jumping into the world that already existed of VR headsets. That's HomePod jumping into the world that already existed of smart speakers. Heck, that's what the original iPhone did, jumping into the already existing world of mobile phones. So now that we're at peak foldable and we've sort of engineered away the compromises and we've got to this point where the tech is mature, it's ready for Apple to jump in if they wanted to and do their own Appleified version. The question is, what is the Appleified thing for a foldable? Because, typically when they jump in a new category, their cheat code is just by making theirs the version that works well with the iPhone, and that automatically gets you a bunch of users from iPhone land. But this is an iPhone Fold. So what's the trick? Will it run a special iPad OS when it's open? Or maybe, every foldable has multi-window support and extra multitasking features, so maybe that will make its way to the iPhone Fold too? Maybe? Don't really know software-wise, but the one big weird thing that the rumors are actually pointing to is playing with aspect ratio again. Because so many of these modern full-size folds has trended towards the regular slab phone aspect ratio when it's closed. And we've talked about this. That leaves you with the square when you open it up, which is bigger, but it is a little bit compromised. It's not as good for widescreen media, things like that. But this iPhone Fold is supposed to be more of a small passport style. So a short, squat, like 5.5-inch display while it's closed. And then that opens up to an almost 8-inch widescreen, kind of like a portable iPad mini. It's a little bit of a throwback. We used to see more interesting shapes in folds a couple years ago, even from earlier Oppo Find Ns. So this won't be the first to try it, and it certainly won't be the last. We'll see how much of the other stuff, like the no-feel crease and the super thin build, silicon carbon battery, flagship cameras, we'll see how much of that other stuff makes it to the iPhone Fold as well later this year. But we'll see. I'm looking forward to it. Also, subscribe to be among the first to see that when it does come out, because we'll cover it here on the channel. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. So LG is dead. Why? Well, probably because they made a bunch of crazy phones without also having like a steady moneymaker at the same time. So let's face it, it's why we love them, but that's why they died. But right before they were gonna die, they actually did have one more trick up their sleeve, one more shot in the barrel. And now that I have it here in my hands, I think it's safe to say this was going to be their craziest shot yet. See, the last phones LG did release before they died were the LG Velvet and the LG Wing. The Wing. This is already insane. I remember doing a video about this phone, and this thing was nuts. It looked like a normal phone at first, but it was split, so you could swivel the spring-loaded top layer up over the top in a horizontal orientation, and then reveal a second smaller square display underneath, so you could have a T-shaped screen experience for some reason. All the engineering and software tricks that went into making this not just work, but feel intentional were just insane. This is the same company that also made the G8X, which was right at the beginning of the folding phone era, but they wanted to offer similar functionality at a fraction of the price. So they made a case with a built-in display so you could plug it in and have a dual screen experience. And there were all sorts of other tricks here too, like a fully folding 180-degree hinge and adding pass-through magnetic charging adapters so you could still fast charge even while the USB port was taken up by the case. Again, incredible. But they got all the way to 2021 without also making a real solid, consistent moneymaker phone, which they would have needed to keep the whole thing alive. It runs out of money. They end up shutting down their whole mobile operation. That was also right around the time that there were some rumors, though, of a rollable smartphone from them that never came out. This is 2 years after we first saw a rolling TV from them at CES. But now the year is 2026, and I've got my hands on that rollable phone anyway, thanks to dbrand. I don't know how they get their hands on these things. They have their ways. I don't ask questions. But yeah, I imagine very few people outside of LG have ever held or seen one of these up until very recently. And spoiler alert, it is definitely their most insane one yet. So the concept is simple, right? You have a regular phone again when it's closed, about a 6.7-inch display diagonally. Looks kind of like a regular slab phone. I mean, it obviously isn't, but we'll get to that in a second. But then, with a simple 3-finger swipe gesture across the whole thing, the whole phone expands and it rolls open to become a slightly more square-ish 7.4-inch mini tablet, basically. So anytime, anywhere at all, you can 3-finger swipe to roll it open or roll it closed, like some sort of scroll or parchment or something. It's funny, the number 6.7 to 7.4 doesn't sound like that big of a difference on paper, but it's obviously the shape of the display that's changing quite a bit. And by the way, yes, it does play that sound on the speakers every single time you open and close it. Pretty sure to try to cover the sound of the motors, which you can also hear, about as effective as coughing to cover up a fart, but that's fine. I like the idea though that there's some engineer that had to sit in a room and come up with the perfect sound to like match the frequencies of the motor to try to hide it. That idea to me is hilarious. Good for that person. So the rollable concept itself is kind of interesting. Like you could see how someone would convince himself that this is a good idea. Like some might want a foldable, but maybe you don't. Maybe you want a different way of having a large screen in your pocket and no crease. Right? So that's an upside. But once you actually make the phone, then you realize how insane this has to be. First of all, you got to store that extra screen somewhere. So when you're looking at it like a normal phone, it appears to just be a single screen that kind of bends over both edges, like a lot of those older Samsung phones from when this was trendy. But the extra screen is hidden in plain sight. It's just to the right where it dips off behind this rail. And if you flip the phone over, you can actually see the rest of the display curving over the back here. And LG decided to make that a clear glass as well, so you can actually still see it, and you can turn on that back part of the display for various little software tricks like displaying messages or even showing camera UI, so you can take selfies with the primary cameras, which are still back here. There's a 64 megapixel main and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. This part actually kind of reminds me of the Xiaomi Mi Mix Alpha, if you remember that phone. I showed this on video. Xiaomi had this concept phone that also never went on sale, and it didn't expand or anything like that, but it was basically all screen all the way around, which was insane, and it let them play with stuff to put on the sides and back of the phone for the ultimate screen to body ratio. Similar to that phone though, there's not really enough room on the side of this phone with the rails to actually have real buttons. So on the left side, the volume buttons are actually pressure sensitive areas up at the top where the buttons normally would be. And then the power button is just on the back of the phone, doubling as the fingerprint reader underneath those cameras. Seems kind of weird at first, but surprisingly reachable. I mostly though just love that they clearly got so far into working on this idea that they got to the stage of like developing those little software tricks to make it feel like a smooth experience. Like this is the lock screen, one of the lock screens. Look at this animation when it expands, this like blooming flower thing, and then when you shrink it, it goes back down to a single petal. That's kind of cool. Also the settings app, you can see this little slide over animation when you go from closed to open to add a column to the settings app. That's nice. And then when you go from open to closed, that subtle slide over to take that column away. Honestly, it feels like they were really close to releasing this. So then, quick rapid fire through a couple other little things that I noticed, just stuff that I wouldn't have thought about until I actually got my hands on it. One is the motors are stronger than I think you would expect. Like, it's not unbreakable, but it's really impressive. If you try to open this phone and give it a little resistance, it does actually push surprisingly hard against that resistance. So it can push a 16-inch MacBook Pro across a table with rubber feet down. That's like 5 pounds. But also, if it's open and you just squeeze really hard in your hand, it can actually trigger it to finish closing itself to sort of just prevent damage, and then it flashes an error message. So clearly they've really thought about this. Then number two, can it pinch you when it closes? Kinda yes, it can pinch things. So your fingers are mostly too big to get pinched in the back or the bottom, but it can easily pinch smaller items and then pick them up, like microfiber cloths. Then three, okay, there's no way this is water resistant or dust resistant probably. I know they never got to the stage maybe of being marketed or IP rated or even named for that matter. But when it's open, I mean, look at these teeth. You can just tell. You can see the teeth of the gears at the top and the bottom. You can see air gaps. So between that and the fact that this soft, flexible display is constantly exposed to the elements, unlike a regular modern folding phone where it's protected all the time, this was probably not going to have the best durability. So then number four, okay, so you can change the different sounds that play when you unroll, and I think they're all roughly the same length of time that it takes to unroll. So you can hear these different versions of sounds that play that can mask the sounds of the motors. You can also turn that sound completely off, in which case the motor by itself sounds like this. Then number five, there is less of a crease than a folding phone, yes, but it's not no crease. Like theoretically, one of the biggest advantages of a form factor like this is the display doesn't have to fold in half around a super tight radius. But you know, there is still some curve here to roll over to the side. So there's just a larger radius of something, like just a little wavering you can see a little bit more clearly when the display is off. Not really a big deal compared to some of the creases we've seen, but something interesting I found. There are some other notable specs that I found while just digging through the settings here, like a 4,500 milliamp hour battery and at 12 gigs of RAM. None of this stuff really matters because it's not a real phone, but if you want to see how hilariously over-engineered the inside of this phone is, you can watch Zach, Jerrig Everything's video, because he also got one, and he took those screws and took them out, and it looks ridiculous inside. And you can see in his video, there's not just one, but two motors that are doing all the opening and closing of the phone. And then there's these like 3 spring-loaded arms pushing the whole chassis over to the side while it unrolls. It's wild. I'll link his video below. So, you know, shout out to LG, RIP. We clearly don't know like how much they would have charged for this or even what they would have called it. You know, you can leave your best guesses at something like that down below. But what we do know is they got insanely far in the development process. This is functional hardware, working software, special features, all that stuff. They just didn't survive long enough to actually ship it. I would say it feels like LG is the only one who would actually try to ship a phone like this, but there is word on the street that Samsung is also trying to do a rollable type of smartphone even still. Maybe this year, maybe in the future, we'll see. Definitely get subscribed to be among the first to see that if it does come out, because I'll definitely get my hands on that. But yeah, now you've seen it, the unreleased LG rollable phone. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace. Okay, so this is it. Welcome to a hands-on and first impressions of a multi-folding smartphone. This is the Samsung Galaxy Z Trifold. And it might sound crazy, like there's already so many comments that I've seen about how this looks ridiculous and pointless and looks like a gimmick and all that. But now that I've used this phone, this is a device that's actually starting to make foldables make sense to me. Hear me out. So this is the shape of most other foldables we've seen. It looks, like a single phone when it's closed, and then you open it up to a larger, maybe 8-inch square, which is super cool. But this is the Trifold. It opens not once, but twice to give you a massive 10-inch tablet, basically, that can fit in your pocket. And the difference between an 8-inch screen and a 10-inch screen might not sound like much, hold your jokes, but it's the shape of that screen, the rectangular aspect ratio, that's what's making all the difference here. Now, this is technically not the first Trifold smartphone. This is the Huawei Mate XT that I made a video about back in 2024. This one, though, folded like a Z. So what you have here is this super large display that's folded over the outside. So you could use either a single pane or a dual pane, or all the way open as this Trifold with a huge screen. And it's always on the outside exposed to the elements. So this Samsung Trifold is a little different. It folds a little more like the letter U. So there's a cover display on the outside, or you can flip it over and fully unfold everything to reveal a second interior display, which is the one that folds twice. So while you use that, the cover display is just kind of sitting unused on the back. So this is really interesting. Clearly worse in some ways, but clearly better in some other ways. I have a lot of thoughts, but let's just get the specs out of the way first. So it's a Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy inside, so it's technically not the absolute latest and greatest 8 Elite Gen 5, but it seems like they've been working on this phone for long enough that this is the most recent flagship chip they could use, and it's obviously only a year old, so still a really great chip. 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. Then there's the triple cameras on the back. They're essentially the same ones as the Z Fold 7, so a flagship grade 200 megapixel primary camera, but then some pretty mid other cameras, a 10 megapixel 3x zoom and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. The cover display up front is also essentially the same as the Z Fold 7, 6.5 inches, 21 by 9, 120 hertz, and 2600 nits. The biggest difference, of course, is how much phone you're holding when you use it in single screen mode, because you can see all of that metal and those hinges. This phone is a heftier 12.9 millimeters thick. And it's also over 300 grams, so it feels like it's about 50% more phone you're holding than the regular Fold. Now, looks crazy on camera and looks crazy on paper. Those are big numbers. But holding this phone and using it, it's not sleek by any means, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel that ridiculous. For some perspective, this is actually thinner than the Z Fold 1, and the Z Fold 2, and the Z Fold 3, and the Z Fold 4, and the Z Fold 5. Something to think about. Either way, it does mean, while using this phone closed, it is a little bit clunky. The bezels are pretty thin and all, but this is obviously not why you're getting this phone. You're getting this phone because you can unfold everything, and you end up with this massive tablet-sized 10-inch display. So now when it's open, this tablet is 3.9 millimeters thin at its thinnest point, which is over here on the left, and 4.2 millimeters at its thickest point. So it feels really thin and easy to hold, and suddenly 309 grams is not so heavy after all. And I think context, again, helps so much with this. Most 10-inch tablets are around 500 grams, so they're heavier than this. But also, most roughly 10-inch tablets, including Samsung's own, have 8,000 milliamp hour batteries. not this one. This battery has to be squashed into this super ridiculously thin form factor, and it's also split into 3 separate columns. So this one totals 5,600 milliamp hours, which technically, yes, is the largest ever in any Samsung folding phone, but it's also definitely on the small side for something with a 10-inch tablet-sized screen, if that makes sense. I feel like I've hammered this home so many times this year, but silicon carbon battery? Maybe the next gen. It just feels like the perfect phone for that, obviously, being super thin like this. But it is also still, it's actually the fastest charging foldable Samsung's ever made. It's 45-watt charging now, with a charger included in the box. So that's pretty nice. And they also kept 15-watt wireless charging along with the IP48 rating from the Z Fold 7. So the specs are pretty solid, sure. But the reason I'm saying that this phone is making foldables make sense now is because the screen that you get when you unfold it, this widescreen 10-inch tablet, is a massive difference from all the regular folds. Here, I think this really says it all. This is a full screen video on a regular slab phone, and we're all used to this, right? Now, this is the same full screen video on the inside screen of a fold. You know, it's a big screen technically, it's an 8-inch square, but the video frame that you're watching is not that much bigger. There's just a bunch of blank pixels around it. So this is the same video on the trifold, and you see how much better that is? That's the main theme here for why this is worth exploring, this widescreen aspect ratio thing. In this case, it's 16 by 11, and it just really makes for a way more expansive canvas. Full screen videos, also full screen games feel really nice. There's a ton more real estate for them. And while we're at it, here's a few more nicely optimized things I noticed while playing with this large horizontal display. The Files app lets you see multiple columns at once, so you can fit a whole 3 layers of the file system deep and see it all. The YouTube app also looks really nice, basically because it's just the tablet YouTube app, so you can scroll related videos or read comments while the video still plays in a pretty big window. Web browsing is also just better from having a sheer ton of real estate. I keep using that phrase, but I actually enjoyed a lot of regular apps, just like the web browser or social media apps, in portrait mode and landscape mode, just because they feel huge. Also side-by-side apps, whether you split them top-bottom or left-right, you can do 3 apps side-by-side. They all just have way more room to breathe instead of being compressed and tiny. Oh, and this just happens to be the only Samsung phone that they'll let you run Samsung Dex on its own. So without being connected to a monitor, it will do the multi-window and multiple spaces with different setups with a connected mouse and keyboard. And if you do connect it to a monitor, you can have it act as a second screen, which is smart. I also gotta say, I've only spent a little bit of time with this phone, but I do feel like you can see that it is very well considered. Like, I can almost feel like the different variations and versions that they went through to get to this point. Like, for example, opening the phone, you always pull from the same spot. They made the bottom leaf of this trifold just a little bit longer than the other two, so it actually sticks out a little bit. And that is super convenient to just grab that little lip to open it up. And then the strength of the magnets that hold it together are really nice and solid. And then you pull the lip, it opens. Then the leftmost hinge also springs nicely open because there's a lot of nice force to it. It all just feels very solid to open and close. Then the nice smooth fiberglass composite on the back. You know, this is the only color available for this phone, but I also think it makes a lot of sense because it's touching screen on the back here. It's also a huge fingerprint magnet, so that's too bad. But then, you know, you can only fold it a certain way. Left side first, then right side, which wraps around it. So if you try to fold the right side first, it gives you this little message and vibrates and tells you, no, don't do that. That's not how you fold this phone. Also, without a case, I noticed that just like the Fold 7, this is one of the biggest rockers on a table the world has ever seen. But alongside that charger, this phone also comes with a case that basically fixes that. So what's the catch? There's got to be a reason why not everyone's doing this. There has to be downsides, right? Well, yes, but there's not that many. Like the middle screen is the obvious one. This is going to be the most delicate part of the phone, having a display that not only folds twice, but also folds in 2 different directions and with 2 different radii. Like you can obviously see these creases if you're looking for them, but you can also see that the crease on the left is a little bit smaller than the crease on the right because it is a tighter curve radius when you fold it up versus folding the right side around the left side. I also obviously don't have any long-term data on using this phone, but I would consider this a first-gen device when thinking about durability and how that might go. I mean, it's nice that it is fully protected on the inside, but It's going to be a delicate screen. It's also not the brightest in the world. So the outside screen is full 2600 nits. The inside is only 1600. So kind of limits like the outdoor use and super high brightness stuff. Stuff that I guess I expect with first gen. You could also totally say that the thickness and weight while using it closed is a con, because obviously it's worse than normal folds today. But then again, I don't know how much thinner this thing can actually get. I mean, they still have to get a decent battery in there and decent speakers and still a USB Type-C port. This is starting to feel pretty close to the dimensional limit of a trifold setup. So it will be interesting to see how they evolve it from here and what a second generation actually looks like. But then, of course, the elephant in the room, price, obviously. I mean, this is 2 screens, so twice as many screens as a normal phone. It's twice as many parts, obviously twice as many hinges as a regular fold. It's like 50% more screen and then also 50% more thickness and 50% more weight. So 50% more price. Now, Samsung in the US has not given me an official cost for what this is going to retail for here, but I bought this one and I imported it from Samsung Korea, and this cost the equivalent of about $2,500 US there. So I'm just doing the math. I expect it to probably be in the same range, $2,500 to $3,000 here, which is a lot. It's pricey. It's the top of the range, but also maybe not insane. I think my take is, for the right person who knows what they're getting into, this can be worth it. I really think this would be a nice, fun phone to use and daily for having a legit 10-inch display, a tablet in your pocket wherever you go. Like, that's such a game breaker. And it's interesting now to see different approaches to the trifold thing with the Z that folds to the outside. And sometimes the ability to use half open is kind of interesting, but again, it's just the square, when I just feel like the rectangle huge thing is way more interesting. So yeah, I don't know. This is really cool. And it's also just hilarious that this exists from Samsung, isn't it? Like, the same company that is ridiculously slow moving and chill and conservative on their Galaxy S phones. Like, they don't want to change too much. They don't want to rock the boat or do anything crazy, but they'll also try this completely insane trifold thing and just throw stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. And maybe it'll stick. I think people are going to get this phone and are going to really like it. Obviously, the asterisk still is durability. We'll see. But yeah, it makes sense now. Also, did you know Christmas Eve is literally a week from now? That's 7 days from when I'm publishing this video. So if you're still gift shopping and haven't found anything great, you need to pay attention, because Ridge, the sponsor of this video, wants you to know that their biggest sale of the year is still going on, with up to 47% off almost everything on their site. So if you're not sure where to start, I would recommend Ridge's 5-in-1 magnetic power bank. It's what I use, and pretty much everyone at the studio uses one too. It charges multiple devices at once with USB Type-C, Lightning, and MagSafe, and has a built-in kickstand, and it's sold out multiple times this year. It's really good. Another personal favorite, though, is Ridge's tracker card. So instead of having an AirTag everywhere, it's a slim card that fits right into your Ridge wallet and works with Apple's Find My and charges wirelessly. And of course, there's the new Ridge 2.0 wallet. It's lighter, more modular, comes in MagSafe versions, and includes Ridge's industry-leading built-for-life warranty. So head over to ridge.com/MKBHD for up to 47% off, and since it's so close to the holiday, free expedited shipping. So don't be the one that forgot to get a great gift this year. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of the trifold in the comments below. I think it's a pretty polarizing phone, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. Peace. So, in the wake of probably the biggest update to iPadOS in its entire history, I've also been testing this amazing Android tablet, and it's kind of reminded me that now, more than ever, these things kind of have a problem, and I just wanted to get all of my thoughts into one video. Now, the reason I bring up the iPad is because it actually has a version of the same problem, which is we have smartphones and we have computers, and so very few people actually need a device in between a phone and a computer. And this could be addressed if maybe there was something special that you could do on a tablet that you can't do on a phone and can't do on a computer. But that is really niche. So take the Apple version of this, right? Obviously the iPhone is extremely popular. Most developers make their apps for the phone because it's easy. One version of the app, millions of customers. And so there are very few actually good dedicated iPad apps, like built from the ground up for the iPad. Now, of course, it's not zero. There are some really cool ones. I love Pixelmator for iPad, for example. Procreate is amazing. And there are a few others that are really dialed iPad apps, but that is a minority. Many iPad apps are just gently scaled up iPhone apps, and they're fine at this point. And many others are literally just iPhone apps with no changes made at all, with just the little 2x button to the side to make them bigger. It's actually been a running joke on this channel how long there has been no iPad app for Instagram, which, like, think about that. It's 2025, and this is the absolute best this trillion-dollar company with tens of thousands of employees is willing to do. It's actually making headlines now that Meta's actually made a WhatsApp app for iPad, that they might also make an Instagram app for iPad. Either way, the point is, even on the most popular tablet in the world, most of the apps that work on it are just fine, and a tiny fraction of them are really, really good. So that's why so many reviews of the highest end Pro iPads for years have kind of all been along the same lines, which is like, this hardware is amazing, the chip is incredibly powerful, again, the screen is so nice, but I can't actually do anything special over a base iPad or even an iPhone because iPadOS is still iPadOS, and the app situation is still exactly what it was before. You can go back and watch even my own iPad Pro reviews. That's what I was saying. I was not the only one. And now this new iPadOS 26 does feel like a game changer, but we'll get to that in a separate video. Subscribe to see that. But the point is, the value that you can get out of an iPad has always felt limited. It's felt capped. But you clicked on an Android video. So this here is the newest and latest and greatest best Android tablet that I have used. It's ridiculously good. This is the OnePlus Pad 3, and every possible thing you could want out of a high-end Android tablet, this thing's got it. Crazy powerful Snapdragon 8 Elite chip paired with 12 or 16 gigs of RAM and up to half a terabyte of storage. It's super fast, ultra responsive, and it has a 13.2-inch 144 hertz display. These bezels are, pretty thin and even all the way around, hides the selfie camera. It's a 7:5 aspect ratio, so it's a little taller than a 16:9 widescreen, and it's a super sharp 315 pixels per inch. It's almost 3.4K tall. The whole thing is also just under 6 millimeters thin, so it's visually just as impressive as any other piece of thin, powerful tech, and yet somehow inside this, they've packed a 12,140 milliamp hour battery. And this battery is so awesome. This thing just lasts and lasts forever. Just for context, the last two OnePlus pads both had around a 9,500 milliamp hour battery, and they had pretty good battery life. The large 13-inch M4 iPad Pro has about a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. This is 12,000. So it just lasts and lasts for hours and hours of use, plus has been optimized for some particularly impressive standby time, which is actually important for tablets, because you know how they sometimes go a while without being used, and then you go to pick it up again and it's dead, which is annoying. So their stat is if you charge it to 100% and then turn it off, then 2 years later, turn it back on, it will still have power, which is ridiculous and maybe also a little bit of proof of the Android tablet problem. But my stat is I put this in my backpack with 85% after using it for a bit, and then the next day, 24 hours later, took it out of my backpack to use it again, 84%. So that's without any sort of battery saver features or anything like that. And the cherry on top is it fast charges at 80 watts. And it still somehow has room for some of the best speakers I've heard in any tablet, including iPad Pros. It's actually 8 speakers in total, quad woofers and quad tweeters. They get really loud with very little distortion. Kind of seems to bend physics a little bit that so much sound can come out of this thing. And this whole thing, the price, $699, which is sick. And that includes the 80-watt charger in the box. So great screen, great chip, great battery, great speakers. It's got cameras, one on the back, one on the front, who cares? But this whole tablet is a great deal, and yet, who's gonna buy one? Because the exact same problem I talked about earlier is still true. Like, most people have a phone, and then for bigger tasks, a computer. So the tablet has to do something that both a phone and a computer can't do. Now, I realize we are in the bubble here of tech YouTube videos, so there will be people in the comments of this video who are like, oh, this is the exact tablet I was waiting for. I can finally play this specific game on a bigger screen at 60 FPS, totally, that's valid. But if you think about the typical person who's maybe using a tablet for, some web browsing, some light YouTube watching or Netflix or whatever, and some work stuff, a couple Zoom calls here and there, clearly this can do all that, but it's also definitely overkill. So this is an amazing, super powerful, kind of beautiful razor-thin tablet that slots into a bag and can go anywhere with you and last forever and has great speakers. It's the whole package, and yet it kind of doesn't stand a chance to sell a whole lot and become mainstream. And that is the Android tablet problem in a nutshell. It's basically that no matter how great an Android tablet is, it will be incredibly niche. I think it's actually kind of amazing how narrow I've seen the use case become for these tablets for the past couple of years. Like, I feel like 90% of the iPads I've seen since 2020 have been either at a point of sale system in a store where they like flip it around and ask you how much you want to tip, or in the hands of a child who is just about to cry and now it's playing Cocomelon full blast. So in the Android world, I don't know if there's a solution to this problem. Obviously, this has been the double-edged sword of Android for a while. There's all the upside of all the huge variety of choices you have, of hardware, of aspect ratios, of foldables, flippables, trifolds. It's all sweet, but that also means that no single one of them is easy to recommend to large groups of people, and that the experience across all of them is not going to be as consistent. Okay, so I think now that the casuals have probably tuned out at this point in the video, and the true tech nerds are still here, for those of you considering actually buying this OnePlus Pad 3, I got a few more things that you might want to know. So this display, like I said, is huge and it's sharp and it's 144 Hertz, which is awesome, but it's not AMOLED like those Galaxy tabs. Those Samsung tablets, which are more expensive, definitely do have nicer looking screens. So if you're in it for the media, you're gonna wanna go AMOLED, but this is still a nice, fast LCD. And then also Oxygen OS here, just like on the phones, there's a lot of great features. They've just added their AI stuff here, but there's also a lot of copying iOS left and right still. I think it's hilarious that they continue doing the dynamic island bit, even though there's no camera cutout on the tablet. But hey, they've also gone the extra mile with all of the accessories. There is a stylus, there is a keyboard dock, there is a magnetic folio case. You can look at it as copying, but it's also kind of just feels like offering as many equivalents as possible, so it makes the pain of switching from an iPad and a stylus and a keyboard dock as minimal as possible. The battery life is awesome, but if you use this tablet like I do, which is high brightness most of the time and a lot of high energy stuff, or if you game a lot, you can still run through it in a day. 7 or 8 hours of screen on time is what you should expect, but its superpower really is the standby time. But anyway, I just wanna leave this video by closing out with a question for you guys. If you have a tablet, I just wanna know what you use it for. What do you use your tablet for? And if you don't have one, what would you use a tablet for if you got one? I kinda suspect a lot of the answers below are going to be like single-use things that the tablets we like to check out are very overpowered for, but yeah, it's cool. We can acknowledge that these are super awesome pieces of tech, but that also most people probably won't need to be buying them. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. So, tick-tock. The tick-tock upgrade cycle is a classic. Last year, it felt like Samsung barely updated the Fold 6 and the Flip 6. They got new chipsets, sure, but other than that, almost changed nothing. Tick. But now this year we have a new Galaxy Z Fold 7 and Z Flip 7, and there are actual meaningful hardware updates this time. So talk, I guess. So welcome to your hands-on and first look at the latest generation of foldables from Samsung. Now, most of my thoughts here are going to be on the Fold, the big one, because Samsung has made some actually noticeable changes to a lot of this phone, and it's kind of going to hit one of either two ways. One, if you're not really in the phone world very much, in which case, hi, welcome to a phone video. This is gonna be amazing because it's a brand new, super thin, ultralight foldable phone. Super cool. If you are in the phone world though, and you've seen a lot of these videos before, and you see what the other companies overseas are doing with their ultra thin foldables, then it's gonna feel like, Samsung's catching up. Either way you slice it, it is a big difference with the Fold 7. They've made it way thinner and way lighter. Each side unfolded is a little over 4 millimeters, and so the whole thing closed is only 8.9 millimeters this time, and they've worked on simplifying and strengthening and thinning up the components on the inside, so the hinge, the chassis, etc. So the whole thing weighs 215 grams. That's actually lighter than an S25 Ultra. And all of this is in the spirit of being a much more usable slab phone when it's closed. So the difference versus last year of just holding the phone and using it closed is very noticeable. It's barely thicker than a USB Type-C port on each side. The buttons and the fingerprint reader are literally thinner to fit on the rail. I've talked about other foldables in the past being more usable while they're closed because of different aspect ratios and different size choices, but I am loving this new folds form factor because when it does unfold, it still unfolds into one of the biggest tablets you can fit in your pocket. 8 inches now, corner to corner. So they've made everything about it folded better, and they've also improved the full-size open usage as well. Plus, it's running One UI 8 on Android 16 out the box, so all the improvements that the latest version of Android has to make big screen multitasking and multi-window better will all be here. In the wide world of foldables, there's different reasons why you might choose different foldables. Some are shorter and squatter, so they're more reachable and better closed, but not as good open. Some are taller and thinner, so not as good closed, but when you open it, the screen's way bigger. This update from Samsung made it better at both closed and open usage. That's sick. So then on the theme of hardware improvements, one of the challenges for these foldables, because they're so thin on each side, is they never quite have room for flagship cameras. And with this Fold 7, that's still kind of true, but the gap is way closer because they have put in the S25 Ultra's main 200 megapixel camera in the new Fold. The glass and optics around it are slightly thinner to make it fit, but that is essentially a true flagship camera and all the pixel peeping benefits that come with it on a Fold. I've loved this camera for months now. Now the 12 megapixel ultra wide and the 10 megapixel 3x telephoto are also still smaller than flagship size, so it's not fully on the level of a slab phone camera system. But to be fair, those are lesser used cameras and the majority of your photos are going to come from the primary camera, so all of those are going to look better. The only downside really being that this camera, I think now is going to have to take my trophy for the most I've ever seen a phone rock on a table with no case on it. This one is absolutely diabolical. There's also an improved, slightly wider angle 10 megapixel selfie camera in the inside screen as well. It's good news in the camera department. But speaking of the inside of this phone, there's also now the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy chip inside. And fun fact, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it is, the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy, the special version of their chip, sells so much volume that I think it actually outsells all of the standard Snapdragon 8 Elites, which kind of makes the Snapdragon 8 Elite for Galaxy the standard chip because there's more of them. Probably means nothing, but it was entertaining to me. But performance-wise, as you'd expect with the limited time I've gotten to play with this thing, it's pretty great. Very smooth. 12 gigs of RAM alongside that chip too, since this is a phone you expect to multitask on, and the 1 terabyte version actually gets 16 gigs of RAM. So all of the Galaxy AI tools, whether you use them a tiny bit once in a while or use them all the time, they're all fast, and they're all ideally improving over time. Samsung's actually talked a big game about their image editor getting even better with background object removal, which is kind of crazy considering how much better they already are than some of the competition. But it isn't all perfect though. I've clocked 3 downgrades with this new generation, and I'll do them in order of how big of a deal I think they are. So first of all, the smallest deal, they removed S Pen support. So the last one actually supported the S Pen. This one doesn't. You know, I guess they kind of had a fork in the road where they could either double down on it and, you know, even give a slot in the phone to keep the S Pen, and hopefully that would be the thing that people loved about it, or they could see that people really weren't using the feature very much. And so they took away the digitizer and made that part of the screen, the UTG, actually a little thicker and just done away with it. I think that's going to anger some people on YouTube because we're the ones that like that feature, but in general, most people didn't use it, so it's gone. But then the second, the medium deal, is the price went up by $100 for the base price. So it was $18.99, now it's $19.99 base. It was already expensive, now it's even more expensive. The ultra cameras and the thinner design and everything this year $2,000 to get a foldable. Now it's not a downgrade, it's actually the same exact size as last year. It's a 4400 milliamp hour battery. And again, for those of you just in Samsung world, that feels about right. Like it can't possibly have the same size battery as the flagship since it has to split it in half and put a hinge in the middle. So okay, 4400 feels about right. But with a $2,000 phone, I just feel the need to at least point out that silicon carbon batteries do exist, and Samsung has been notoriously safe over the past few years about improving their batteries. So it feels like they're leaving something on the table here by not doing silicon carbon. Just for some context, just so you know, this is the Honor Magic V5. It's coming out not even in the US. This is a phone you might not have heard of if you're not in this world, but this phone is even thinner than Samsung's. It's about the same weight, and it has a 5,820 milliamp hour battery, thanks to it being silicon carbon and fast charging and everything. It's a big difference versus 4,400. So if you are the type to use a phone like a power user, which if you're spending this much money on a phone, let's face it, you probably are, or if you use the phone a lot open with this big 8-inch display, you're probably thinking a lot about battery life. So it is kind of a bummer to see Samsung still playing it so safe in that department. Maybe they'll get on the train soon, who knows. Now the Z Flip 7 also did make some interesting changes. Potentially 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Depends on how this goes. So this is the smaller, cheaper, hamburger-style flipping phone. It is the same $1099 starting price as last year, but you'll notice everything is bigger, which at first was a little concerning because the Z Flip is like one of the last small phones, but I think you open it and it's a big phone, so maybe it doesn't matter. But I'll start on the inside because it's pretty simple. It's gone from 6.7 to 6.9 inches diagonally. So now it feels like a proper large flagship slab phone when you're using it unfolded. Obviously everything benefits from it being bigger, watching videos, taking pictures, and of course they fit a bigger battery in there too, up to 4,300 from 4,000. No surprise here. But then they also took advantage of the larger frame to make the cover display closed way more usable as well. And this has been a trend with the past few years with this Flip. But this year, they finally did the thing. They just went full corner to corner, just like the Razr. So those camera rings are just cutouts through the screen now. Now it's a 4.1-inch edge-to-edge cover display, and it's even brighter and 120 hertz now too. So this phone is more usable than ever while it's closed. Maybe you want to triage those notifications or flip through some widgets or even take selfies with the main camera, as many people do. It's all better than ever before. Once again, a pretty impressive hardware win-win. It's better closed and better open with the same update, and it doesn't feel too big or unwieldy. But then the slightly possibly concerning update is they've gone back from a Snapdragon chip to an Exynos chip in this phone. So last Flip was a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. This one is the Exynos 2500 in the Flip 7. Now, I don't think it's a bad chip. I just don't think that it's as good as the Snapdragon 8 Elite is right now with the combination of peak performance and power efficiency. But apparently this is something to keep an eye on because this could be a preview of the S26. Allegedly, Samsung may be looking to switch fully back to Exynos for everything across the board. That's a rumor that's been floating, that it may be a 2nm processor and possibly leveling up performance for that, but we'll see. But as of right now, that's the story for the Fold 7 and Flip 7. Now, I'm publishing this the day of Samsung's Unpacked, so their event is going to have some other stuff announced as well. The Watch 8 is one of them, and I'm loving the circular design, but it also actually has a new feature to measure toxins in your body through your skin in the form of an antioxidant index. So you actually have to take the watch off and measure it through your thumb, and then it can tell you if you've been drinking enough or if your diet has been trash, I guess. There's also a Flip 7 FE Fan Edition, which is essentially a Flip 6 with an Exynos 2400 for $899. But let me know if you want anything else from that event covered. I'll be watching it just the same as you guys. And also shout out to Ridge, partner and channel sponsor, who is running a huge summer sale right now. So if you flip over to ridge.com/MKBHD, or even on Amazon actually, you'll see a bunch of stuff, various rings and luggage and wallets on sale, up to 49% off until this Friday. So just a little call out for you guys to get a great deal at prices you probably won't see again for gear that you'll actually use. Sneaky good deal, the matte black everything wallet. This is one of the first things I helped to design once I joined as the chief creative partner. All matte black, but then oil-filled lettering engravings at the bottom. Pretty fire. $69. Nice. And Ridge does, whether there's a sale or not, they do a 99-day risk-free trial period. That's a pretty big deal. Basically, for 99 days, you use this, and if at any point you realize you don't like it, you can send it back and get your money back. That's hard for companies like Ridge to offer, but they do anyway because they stand by the quality of this stuff. And then the same durability and lifetime warranty that you already trust. It's all good stuff over there. So head over there quick, get something that you like before it's over this Friday. It's one of the best sales I've seen them run. Okay, thanks to Ridge for sponsoring this portion of the video. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. So when iPadOS 26 got unveiled at WWDC this year, it looked like a game changer. And I wasn't the only one saying that. Many people had the same feeling watching all this new stuff. It felt like everybody on the internet who was waiting for years for Apple to just do the thing, just watched Apple finally do the thing. They just made the iPad a computer. But, you know, this is Apple we're talking about here, and there's no way they would just turn the iPad into a Mac, right? They still need to sell Macs. Obviously, there's got to be some kind of catch, right? So I did what any logical tech reviewer would do. I installed iPadOS 26 beta as soon as it was available on my iPad, and then I took my MacBook Pro that I've used daily out of my backpack. So I've been living with the iPad in its place for the past 3 weeks or so now to be able to give you a real answer. So first things first, I already loved my iPad before this update. Like, full disclosure, it was one of my favorite pieces of tech, and I will also admit that I didn't use it that much, because when you also have a MacBook Pro readily available to do any work tasks and stuff that I need to get done outside of the studio, this just kind of became like a glorified media machine. Like, lots of YouTube video watching, lots of web browsing, some occasional email or Slack, and then once in a while, I'll have some fun with image editing or playing a game or two. But again, if I have my laptop with me, which I almost always do, then this extremely powerful iPad often went underused. So I would consider this update a success if I can stop carrying my MacBook Pro with me. Except for editing. I know I'm probably always going to need that for editing just based on my workflow, but for everything else, I wanted to see if the iPad could do it. So that's what I did. And I was actually pretty excited to try this. Now, the thing is, I feel like many YouTubers have taken on this exact challenge before with previous versions of iPadOS over the past few years. They've probably used the same title of this video before. Can this iPad be a laptop? Can the iPad be my full-time productivity machine as a student? Can it be my only computer? What is a computer? Each one of those videos details the walls that you run into when you try to do computer-like things on the system that is iPadOS. With this latest update, some of those walls are now gone. Some of those walls are definitely still there. So here's an example. The thing you've probably heard the most about is this new window management, menu bar, and all this stuff. And it is awesome, or at least it's dramatically better than before. It breaks down the wall of multitasking with several windows open easier than ever. Literally any app you open on the iPad, you can drag the corner to resize the window to whatever size you want, and then you can just go crazy, opening a bunch of overlapping windows, moving them around, going back and forth, and multitasking to your heart's content. It's never been quicker or easier to get into this multi-window state, which feels very Mac-like. And then there's plenty of tricks to managing the windows once you're there. Like, you can flick a window to each side to take up half the screen. That's super useful. You can double tap the top of any app for it to go back to full screen. And then at any time, you can swipe down to see the menu bar for an app, which looks exactly like it would on a Mac and includes the stoplight window controls in the corner to maximize or minimize or close something on the spot. And also, I gotta be honest, I don't know that there's a difference between minimizing and closing an app on the iPad, because when I close an app, it just goes away. If I minimize an app, it just goes away. But the minimizing version feels very Mac-like, so hey, give the people what they want. But I think the most important thing to remember here is this multi-window mode is just that. It's a mode that you can easily flip on and off with a single touch in the control center. So I found this super useful. When it's off, you know, apps open full screen every time like they always did. The handle at the bottom corner is gone, and you can pull down from anywhere at the top to get notifications or control center and swipe across the bottom to flip between recent apps. This is the iPad we've all always been used to. and it still works exactly like that. But if you go to Control Center and go into windowed apps mode with one click, suddenly that resizing anchor appears. Use it wherever you want. Also, swiping down from the middle now brings up the menu bar instead of notifications, unless you swipe down again or swipe down from the far left. And multitasking remembers groups of windows and even window sizes as you're working. It's very powerful, even more than Stage Manager was. You can now have up to 8 windows open at the same time instead of 4. But you know, it's also a little different from a Mac. For example, I noticed just as you're resizing windows, some apps respond instantly as you're dragging your finger. So you can just drag them to size and move on really quick. But some apps don't respond quite in real time as you're dragging your finger. They kind of go in stages. So you might have to resize a few times to get it exactly the way you want it. But then of course, you know, on a Mac, there is no window limit as far as I know that you could easily reach anyway. So you can go way crazier. There's more spaces for multitasking and way more, probably more RAM and just more flexibility in general. But the ceiling for multitasking on an iPad is higher than ever before. By the way, I was curious how this would look on an iPad mini, or if they would like restrict any of this multi-window stuff or having a ton of stuff open at once. But nope, you can go just as crazy with tiny floating windows all over the iPad mini's display. You can knock yourself out. It's way less useful here because there's way less pixels, but confirmed they still let you do it. Anyway, as I continued to use the iPad through these weeks, it would continue to be mostly pain-free, lots of using it like the usual, like full screen, then occasional blitzes of multitasking once in a while. And here and there would be one computer-like task that I'd have to really think through, and then it would be a little bit slower and kind of a pain, but then I could figure it out. I could basically eventually get it done. Like I got sent a PDF on Slack that I had to sign and send back. Okay, on a computer, that's pretty easy, but here, let's see, open it. Okay, open in browser, share, more. Okay, markup. Then I sign it, and then I save it to the iPad again, and then go back to Slack and attach it. Okay, success. Like there's no wall there. You can definitely still do the thing. It just takes a little bit of extra thinking, a little more friction, and some file management stuff, but that's scattered throughout the days. And all of this made me realize, you know, with the apps that I use and the workflows that I've built, the question isn't actually, can I replace my laptop with an iPad? Because yes, I can. The question really became, do I want to? Because sometimes, yeah, I do, but also sometimes I don't want to. Like there's many, many moments of the iPad being better and more enjoyable to use than any laptop. It's this awesome touchscreen first device. You know, you have one app full screen at a time. To me, that just means like I can't get distracted by Discord or Twitter or just other windows I have open, so I can just lock in on one or two things at a time. The iPad's display is beautiful. It's super thin, and this thing is a pound lighter than my laptop, so my backpack feels lighter just carrying the iPad around. It sounds subtle, but it really felt great. And this stuff makes me want to use the iPad all the time for as much as I can. But every once in a while, like I said, I'd run up against that little wonky thing or this tiny limitation here or there. Like on the iPad, I can't have 2 audio sources playing at the same time. So I can't have music playing in the background while I also watch a YouTube video while researching something. I can only do one at a time. Dang. Or when I'm trying to work without a table on a couch or something, the iPad's keyboard case, it's good. It's better than it's ever been. There's a real cursor now. It's fantastic. But compared to a laptop, like this thing is still really top heavy and kind of clunky and weird to use. And there's less metal, more silicon and rubber, and it's just harder to open and close. Dang. Also the Files app. The new Files app is great. Way better than ever before. You can plug in external storage and sort through things easily, import, export, view information about your files, connect to servers, the whole thing. But it can sometimes be just a little confusing where files actually are, like when I airdrop photos and media to the iPad and it doesn't go into the downloads folder like it would on a Mac, just slightly off. Dang. So look, I couldn't be more clear. I love the iPad's display and how good it looks and how good it sounds and how thin and sleek and fun it is to use this touchscreen everywhere. And it's more capable than ever with this new software. That's a fact. But the iPad's strength is actually its versatility. So my take is, I still don't think the iPad was designed to replace a laptop for most people most of the time. But I do think it is capable of becoming almost an entire laptop with the right accessories. But then look at what you've created, like adding a mouse and a keyboard, a display, the folio case, like the whole thing you're carrying around is suddenly basically the same thickness and weight as a laptop again. So you might as well just get the laptop. But the iPad can also be a great media machine. It's a really nice lean back experience instead of the typical lean forward experience, if that makes sense. It also happens to have cameras on the back, so you can take photos and videos with it. It also has cellular, which a lot of computers don't. It also happens to have an awesome stylus support, so it can be your handwritten notepad or it can be an artist's canvas. All of these things that computers and laptops typically don't have. So that's the point. It's just more versatile than a single laptop would be. So if you're trying to answer the question, should you get an iPad instead of a laptop? Well, then I'm gonna just stop you right there. If all you need is a computer, then no. I think you just get the computer. It's designed to be better just at that. Better balance, better hinge, better keyboard. That's what it's made for. But if you want something that can be most of a computer, but also do all of these other things, then just think of the top 5 things you're gonna do on this machine and think, would you rather do those 5 things on a tablet or on a computer? And then there's your answer. So no doubt the ceiling has been raised for what an iPad is capable of as a computer, but it's still an iPad, which is pretty sweet too. Thanks for watching. Also, if you want to check out the rest of my iOS 26 coverage and all the other stuff that's new with that, check out my iOS 26 video. It'll be right here. It's all the liquid glass and the new features and stuff. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace. All right, welcome back to Dope Tech. It has been too long. It's been more than a year since the last Dope Tech video, but I love this series. I've made more than 30 of them. I've shown off more than 100 products in various ways through Dope Tech, and I just feel like we should be getting back to this. So something I've noticed while we were heads down in busy season and all the smartphones and all the brand new stuff is there are a couple things that I missed during this year, but those things were often successors to previous gadgets that I've also already talked about on this channel, things that I've had in Dope Tech before. So this is Dope Tech Revisited. Everything that I'm showing in this Dope Tech is a follow-up to something that I have previously showed some older version of on Dope Tech in the past, so we can see if it's still dope, if it's gotten better since it came out, or worse, and how it measures up. Also, thanks to Google for sponsoring a portion of this video. More on that later. So first up, the goated productivity mouse, the Logitech MX Master. Now, I've personally been using the MX Master since the first one, and actually even before that when it was called the Performance MX, but it first appeared in Dope Tech 6 years ago as the MX Master 3 with a bunch of other stuff, but it was actually the most replayed part of that video. Since then, they've also come out with MX Master 3S, and then this is MX Master 4. So the benefit of having such a popular mouse is Logitech basically gets tons of data on how we use our mice, the things we like about it, the things we don't like about it, and then they can make iterative improvements over and over again on each one. And so this one, the 4, I've noticed has some bigger changes, but still keeps that formula and feels familiar. So it's still a great size, still a great shape, for righties anyway. But a lot of older MX Masters, you might see end up looking kind of crummy after a few years because of the rubberized finish that they all have. Well, Logitech noticed that. So this one should avoid all that because it's an entirely new plastic finish. Now, obviously plastic has a negative connotation, but in certain products, it just makes sense, like headphones and computer mice. So there's no finish to wear off. It's just texture. It's lightweight, it's recycled, and the little micro texture they've put on this middle part gives you a little bit of extra grip. So I'm pumped that it should have a much longer life of looking basically new. But then there's also a whole bunch of other little things. Like the horizontal scroll wheel is moved a bit higher up, which is awesome for me because I use it all the time while video editing. The mouse click is also now, with the last 2 generations, super silent, which is nice in a studio environment like this. There's also a third button added up at the front here in front of the forward and back buttons that can be customized. And then the biggest new addition is actually haptics. And so that's kind of a bold thing to try. Obviously, you have mouse clicks already, but they've added a haptic motor for even more clicks. It's in the middle of the mouse, kind of like right by your thumb, kind of like a smartphone's vibration motor. So when you press this silicon gesture area down here, you can feel it click. Even though it's not actually moving, it's a very convincing click. And then you can turn that up or down in settings, along with tons of other stuff like setting that to be a quick launch shortcut ring for any of your favorite apps, or spaces, or mission control on a Mac, or you can even make your own macros. So the Logitech Options Plus app is just a Fantasyland level of playground for people trying to maximize their productivity. It's kind of like this little Grand Theft Auto weapon select, but for your computer mouse. I personally don't use a ton of these like quick launching features because I am a keyboard and raycast shortcut person on the Mac anyway, but I can see how people would love this. I feel like this is becoming like the Porsche 911 of computer mice, maybe? Like, hear me out. This is not changing very much from generation to generation. It keeps the same silhouette, the iconic shape that everyone knows. But each time they improve a little bit and iterate over and over to the nth degree. And it's the most important product for that company, so they don't want to change it too much. But also, it's just like the ideal enthusiast daily driver. And it's still expensive and doesn't have the best numbers on paper. Like, this is still a $120 computer mouse with a 120 hertz polling rate, where like there are mice out there with 1,000 hertz, 2,000, 8,000 hertz polling rates. But it's not a gaming mouse. It's just a rock solid, pricey, but ideal daily. It's about the most stable, reliable thing you could ask for, and it even now has a USB Type-C dongle, which I'm shocked we actually don't see more of. But yeah, this mouse is absolutely still dope tech. All right, next up is a YouTube legend in its own right. This is the new Devialet Phantom. So I feel like there was a whole era of a couple months on YouTube where a thumbnail with the Phantom in it was like an automatic million views and everybody had to check this thing out. I've actually already covered it twice on Dope Tech, first in the white and gold version, then the Phantom 2, which was smaller but a bit more reasonably priced, so it was a natural follow-up to the expensive first one. And now they came out with this, which is the Devialet Phantom Ultimate. And so there's two sizes of it. There's a smaller 98 decibel version, and then there's this, which is the bigger, louder, more powerful 108 decibel version. So the idea has not changed at all. It's an all-in-one speaker system with a tweeter and woofers that not only gets crazy loud and sounds really good, but it also has this big, dramatic, moving membrane for the woofers and kind of looks like an alien head, if you ask me. They're definitely a conversation starter. But there are also new drivers and a new internal circuitry to make them more efficient and continue to sound even better. But yeah, this is the larger 108 decibel version here, and on this stand, which is kind of the best way to get it close to head level, they're pretty awesome. They're kind of more dense, actually, than you would expect. Picking up each one, it's almost 25 pounds. But yeah, apparently this is the amount of space you'll need to deliver 108 decibels versus the significantly smaller 98 decibel version. And there's also a new app that lets you play with more modes and even pair two together in stereo mode, which is what I have over here by this TV. There's another one over on the other side, and two of them paired together is just crazy. They get ridiculously loud if you want them to, but also just in normal volume, they sound really good. There's an incredible amount of bass. It fills the room, whatever size room you're in, it's going to fill the room. And the stereo separation now of having a left-right channel with these things, it's mad. It sounds crazy. And fun fact, I now mostly see these in Newark Airport. I think it's the older version, but next time you're in Newark Airport, look up in the corners of the little kiosks and the tiny stores they have in between gates, and I guarantee you'll start seeing tons of these little speakers from Devialet, and you'll never be able to unsee them again, at least if you're like me and spend probably too much time in Newark Airport. Anyway, cool overall, obviously, but not a ton of change, still very expensive, and not as hype as they used to be. So I covered the Samsung Galaxy Tab 7 Plus in 2020. And it was the third highest viewed Dope Tech episode that we'd ever made. And once again, it was the highest viewed part of that video. So it feels right to revisit the monster Samsung tablet since we don't get the chance to do this every year. And they do refresh it almost every year. Now, back in 2020, the angle for what made this a potential iPad killer was just this incredible hardware, a massive OLED display in a razor-thin case. In your hands, it barely feels real. It looks crazy. It looks like a movie prop. It's awesome. So 5 years later, this is the Samsung Galaxy Tab S11 Ultra, and it's still pretty ridiculous. Now, you might think that the iPad, with all the improvements that it has made, has eliminated this rivalry, because they've done like a lot of the things, right, that this used to do. It has that super, super thin build now. It has Apple Silicon, and it has iPad OS, which has done a lot of cool things with software. But if you've been paying attention, the Samsung tablets have done a lot of that stuff too, and some new stuff. So it's keeping that rivalry alive. So the Tab S11 Ultra now has a ridiculous laptop-sized 14.6-inch 3K AMOLED display. That's still bigger and higher resolution than any iPad Pro, with plenty of brightness and pitch black blacks. And it's also now even more thin than ever before at, get this, 5.1 millimeters. That's not just thinner than most tablets. That is thinner than the iPad Pro, thinner than the iPhone Air, and just about anything this big with a screen on it. And yet it still has a bigger battery, an 11,600 milliamp hour battery. There's also still up to 16 gigs of RAM. There's still micro SD card support for expandable storage, but there's also still up to a terabyte of built-in storage. It also supports the new S Pen, and it starts at $1,200 for the big one, which, yes, is $100 less than the big iPad Pro. But maybe the most interesting is all the software features that Samsung added to this tablet to keep it competing with iPad OS, which just got that big makeover with iPad OS 26. So on the S11 Ultra, you can have apps automatically load in windowed form every time. You can resize windows to whatever size and shape you want, like literally any size and any shape. The window management features are all super intuitive. You can throw a window over to the side of the screen, throw it up to the top to go full screen, and then you can have multiple different desktops saved with these specific window layouts to come back to. Easy. You can also link it to your phone so that you can make phone calls and send texts on your tablet. Plus, it's still crazy good at all that media stuff that it's always been great at. It's still a wider aspect ratio than any iPad. The contrast ratio of AMOLED is still incredible. And another thing, this isn't nanotexture by any means, but it does have pretty good anti-reflective properties, which make a difference to me in this light-filled studio. So this screen looks good all the time. So yes, the iPad has gotten better, but these Samsung tablets have definitely also gotten better. Not perfect. There's still, the Samsung quirks, and this one also is not a Snapdragon chip, but still really good. And it's clear that they've positioned this right alongside the iPad as a viable alternative and even a killer for some people. Still dope tech. And I would also say, check out the video that I made on switching between iOS and Android, because there are a lot of things that these companies do to try to steal users from each other, and it's fascinating, and it was worth an entire separate video, so I'll link it below. Now, a quick word from today's sponsor. All right, thanks to Google and Best Buy for sponsoring this portion of the video. So the holiday season is upon us, and getting gifts for loved ones is always a tough dance to do. Like, is this something I actually want, or is this a good price for this thing? Where do I even start? But the Google Holiday 100 can help you make sure you're finding the best gifts, because they've taken all of the search and trends data from the past year and put it together into a one-stop shop to find anything that anyone's interested in. And then alongside Google Shopping, you also get a bunch of other tools to help you sort through everything, probably the best of which being Price Insights, which literally gives you the price trends of a thing you're going to get over time, so you can make sure it's really a sale when it says it's a holiday sale. And all the products are sorted into collections and categories, so you'll always have an easy jumping off point to find something you're interested in. And it's as easy as that. Switch 2 is one of the biggest tech trends of 2025, and rightfully so. Got a bunch of big upgrades from the last one. Bigger screen, higher refresh rate, and of course the new Mario Kart. So when you go to look for gifts this holiday season, check out the Google Holiday 100 at the link in the description. And thanks to Google Shopping and Best Buy for helping me unwrap the holidays and be a better gift giver. All right, back to the video. So 9 years ago, I did an 8K RED camera on Dope Tech. And even longer ago, at CES 2016, I did the Nikon D500 in Dope Tech. And the reason I bring this up is, in the meantime, each company has released several other cameras, but then something really interesting happened. Nikon bought RED. Now, in the long, long history of people's favorite tech companies getting purchased, how many of those are a story that ends with everyone being happy? other than people getting paid? Not very many. But with this one, there was at least a chance. There was an opportunity for something really cool. Because Nikon had been toiling away in maybe a distant third place to Canon and Sony for a while, and they've been looking for a way to just break into this mirrorless camera space. And Red has been making incredible high-quality cinema cameras and patenting tons of technology for a while, but never really coming down to an affordable price. So the question is, what are they gonna do? Like, why did Nikon buy Red? Are they finally gonna join forces and create something that can compete with Sony and Canon in the mirrorless space? Are they finally gonna break out and make an affordable, high-quality camera that can actually sell? So we waited, and we waited, and this year, our patience was finally rewarded because they came out with this thing. This is the Nikon ZR, and this is a full-frame mirrorless camera, a collaboration, now that Nikon and Red are one, with a 24-megapixel stacked CMOS sensor, Nikon Z mount, 6K 60 video, 7.5 stops of in-body image stabilization, 15 stops of dynamic range. It shoots R3D, and with this huge 4-inch swiveling touchscreen on the back. This camera really comes out swinging. The spec sheet is awesome, and so it's less of like a Canon R5 competitor and more of like a FX3 competitor. FX3 is very popular, but that camera is $4,000, and this thing is about $2,200. So this thing immediately becomes very interesting, especially to me, someone who's been shooting Red for a while, because it becomes right away the smallest Red camera, and it becomes the Red camera probably with the best autofocus by a mile. And something I've talked about before is so many videos are actually shaped by the tools in subtle ways, but if you make videos, you kind of notice this stuff. Like MKBHD videos, for example, because I shoot them on mostly Red cameras, are all manual focus all the time because they don't really have very good autofocus. But philosophically, I feel like it should be the other way around. The tool should enable whatever creative thing you want to make. So as much as I love the quality of a Red camera, I'm always interested in more flexible cameras, ones that I can go around and shoot in more flexible spaces and more scenarios, but the footage still looks really good. That's like the dream. So I obviously don't need this to be a picture-taking camera by any means, and it kind of isn't. I just need it to be able to travel more easily than this and shoot video that can match to it pretty well. And thankfully it does do that. It's not without its quirks. It also definitely has some little asterisks. So it's not exactly the same R3D, but it's R3D NE, which is still compressed RAW and still pretty good, but a little bit different. But also, as a video camera, the ergonomics are kind of weak. There is no EVF, there's no top handle. Even the side grip here is pretty small for a video focus camera. There's also a micro HDMI port instead of full-size HDMI. There is a single CF Express Type B slot and then a micro SD card slot instead of another full-size slot. I don't think I've ever seen that on a cinema camera. And at the end of the day is Z mount, which means Nikon lenses fit natively, but the Z mount thankfully is very adaptable, so that isn't some horrible downside. But yeah, that's about it. I really like this thing. It is an awesome camera with an awesome screen for an awesome price. But more amazingly, it is a result of two companies merging into one and the consumer actually getting a win out of it. I feel like that never happens, so I'm happy to see that. This obviously isn't a full review of this camera with a ton of sample footage, but I will link some of my favorite reviews from other creators down below, so if you want to check that out, take it from me or take it from them. But yeah, another fun, little random dope tech thing that's new versus what we've seen in the past. And it's been a fun retro type of dope tech video. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.